My name is Lila. I bought my house at a time when I was tired of proving myself to everyone. I was tired of renting spaces that never felt safe and smiling through conversations that drained me. I wanted something solid, something that would still be there when people disappointed me. The house I found sat on a quiet street in Knoxville in America, with cracked pavement and old trees that leaned toward the road like they were listening. It wasn't fancy. The paint was a faded gray and the front door stuck when it rained, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt a deep calm settle in my chest. I worked extra hours, skipped trips, and saved every dollar I could. When I finally signed the papers, my hands shook not from fear but from pride. That house was proof that I could stand on my own. I learned every sound it made. The way the floor creaked near the hallway at night. The way the pipes hummed softly before the heat kicked in. I planted flowers myself, inexpensive ones from a roadside stand, and watched them bloom as if they trusted me. On quiet mornings I drank coffee by the kitchen window and let the sunlight fall across the table. It felt like peace, the kind you don't explain to anyone because words would ruin it. My parents knew I had bought the house, but they never asked what it meant to me. They just nodded like it was a temporary thing, like everything I had ever built. One Sunday afternoon they invited me over for dinner. My parents lived in Dayton, about an hour away, in the same house I grew up in. Walking through that front door always felt like stepping backward in time. My mother, Loretta, moved around the kitchen with sharp, practiced motions. My father, Harold, sat at the table with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular. My sister Marin was already there, seated neatly, her phone face down as she had prepared for something serious. The air felt tight before anyone spoke, and I knew this dinner wasn't about family or food. We sat down, plates warm in front of us. The food smelled good, but no one ate much. They didn't ask how my job was going or whether I liked the new neighborhood. No one asked if I was happy. Instead, my mother folded her hands and looked at me the way she did when she wanted something. She said, "We need to talk about something important," in a calm voice that never meant calm things. My father nodded once, slow and heavy like a judge ready to speak. Then he said it. "You need to sell your house." The words hung in the air, strange and unreal. I waited for him to laugh or explain, but he didn't. My mother added, "Your sister's children deserve a better future. A top university costs real money." She said it like it was already decided, like my role in the story had been written without me. My sister stared at her plate, silent, letting them do the talking for her. I felt something tighten in my chest, like a rope pulling too hard. My house flashed in my mind. The porch, the kitchen light, the quiet evenings. I asked, why would I do that, even though I already knew the answer? My mother leaned forward slightly and said, "Because family helps family. A house is just a building. Education lasts forever." Her voice was soft, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. They talked about numbers like my life was a spreadsheet. They said words like investment and sacrifice. They mentioned the cost of tuition, throwing out figures like $80,000 and $100,000, as if those dollars were just floating in the air, not tied to years of my work. They never once asked how I would live after selling my home. It was assumed I would figure it out like I always had. I listened quietly, my hands wrapped around my glass. When my father asked, "You understand, don't you?" I surprised myself by saying, "No." My voice didn't shake. It felt steady, grounded. "I don't understand why you think you can ask this of me." The table went silent. My mother's eyes hardened and my sister finally looked up, worry flickering across her face. My father frowned and said, "Don't be selfish." That word hit harder than anything else. I thought about the nights I stayed late at work, the weekends I skipped rest, the way I budgeted every dollar so I could afford a place of my own. I thought about how no one helped me when I needed it most. I set my glass down carefully and said, "I'm not selling my house. I earned it. It's my home." The room felt smaller after that, like the walls were leaning in. My mother shook her head slowly. "So you're choosing comfort over family." I stood up then, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The sound made my heart pound, but I didn't sit back down. "I'm choosing my life," I said. "You don't get to take it from me." No one stopped me as I grabbed my coat. No one followed me to the door. The drive home felt long and quiet. Streetlights blurred past as my thoughts raced. I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I should have explained myself better. But when I pulled into my driveway and saw my house waiting there, something settled inside me. I stepped out of the car, stood under the porch light and took a deep breath. The night was still. I whispered, "I'm safe here," because I needed to hear it out loud. 2 days passed without a word from them. Then my phone buzzed with a message from my father. It was short and cold. "Don't contact us until you're ready to do the right thing." I stared at the screen for a long time. They thought silence would punish me. They thought taking themselves away would break me. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was how much I had already been carrying for them. And as I stood alone in my quiet house, I realized this was only the beginning. There was a truth about my life that no one ever asked about, and I never volunteered. For nearly 2 years I had been quietly paying my parents' household bills. Not once or twice in an emergency, but every single month, steady and unseen. I did it from my dining table, usually late at night after the world had gone quiet. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was kindness. I told myself it was what a good daughter did. The truth was simpler and heavier at the same time. I couldn't stand the idea of them struggling, even when they never seemed to worry about how much I carried. Every month the same routine played out. I opened my laptop, logged into accounts with passwords I knew better than my own, and paid for electricity, water, phone service, and a small loan they pretended wasn't there. It added up fast. Most months it was around $2,400, sometimes climbing higher if something broke or needed fixing. A new heater part. A plumbing issue. A surprise fee. I never complained. I never asked for it back. I never said a word to them about it at all. They never thanked me because they didn't know. Or maybe they didn't want to know. I sometimes wondered if my mother suspected, the way she would casually mention that things were tight, and then change the subject. My father never spoke about money unless it was to tell me how I should be spending mine. I learned early that being useful was safer than being honest. When they sent that message telling me not to contact them until I was ready to do the right thing, something shifted inside me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a switch clicking off. The words replayed in my head while I washed dishes, while I drove to work, while I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Do the right thing. As if everything I had already done didn't count. The night I decided to stop paying their bills, I sat alone at my kitchen table in my house. The overhead light hummed softly. My laptop was open, bill pages already loaded out of habit. My finger hovered over the payment button like it always did. I thought about my father's voice, flat and certain, calling my home just a thing. I thought about my mother's calm face while she asked me to give up my life so someone else could have more. I closed the laptop without clicking anything. No speech. No warning. No dramatic announcement. I simply stopped. I expected guilt to crash into me like a wave. I expected panic. Instead, the first thing I felt was stillness. The second was relief. It scared me how light my chest felt, like I had been carrying a weight so long I forgot it wasn't part of me. I kept waiting for the feeling to turn sour, but it didn't. It stayed calm, steady, almost gentle. That week I stayed busy on purpose. I worked late and took long walks after dinner, letting my thoughts stretch out instead of knotting up. On Saturday I drove to Bozeman just to get out of my usual surroundings. The sky felt wider there, the air cooler. I sat in a small cafe, spent $4 on a cup of coffee, and watched strangers talk and laugh like their lives were simple and full. For the first time in a long while I felt like I belonged to myself. A few days later I met my friend Elena for lunch in Santa Fe, where she was staying briefly for work. We sat outside under a striped umbrella, plates between us untouched for a moment as we talked. She looked at me carefully and said, "You seem different." I laughed softly and told her everything. About the house. About the demand. About the silence. And finally about the bills. "They wanted you to sell your home?" she asked, eyes wide. "Yes," I said. Like it was nothing. Like I could just start over anywhere. "And you stopped helping them?" she said, not as a question. I nodded. I did. Elena didn't react the way I feared. She didn't call me cruel or cold. She just leaned back in her chair and said, "That took courage." The word sat between us, unfamiliar but welcome. Courage. I had never thought of myself that way before. That night, back in my house, everything felt quieter than usual. The porch light glowed softly against the dark. The room smelled like clean laundry and lemon soap. I walked through each space slowly, touching the door frames, the back of the couch, the edge of the counter. This place held my effort, my patience, my time. It held me. I slept deeply without jolting awake at imagined problems that weren't mine to solve anymore. The next month arrived without ceremony. I paid my own bills as usual. I made dinner. I watered my plants. I went about my life. Somewhere else, the bills I used to handle went unpaid. Notices arrived. Late fees stacked up. I didn't know the details yet, but I could feel the shift coming like distant thunder. Part of me worried about what people would say when they found out. I imagined relatives shaking their heads, calling me heartless. I imagined my parents painting themselves as victims. But another part of me, stronger now, understood something important. I had already given more than anyone ever acknowledged. I had given money, yes, but also silence, patience, and pieces of myself. Stopping didn't make me cruel. It made me honest. I started to see how much of my life had been shaped around avoiding their discomfort. I rearranged my plans, my savings, even my dreams so they wouldn't have to face consequences. Cutting off the bills wasn't revenge. It was a boundary. A quiet one but firm. As the days passed, I noticed small changes in myself. I laughed more easily. I breathed more deeply. I made plans without first wondering how they would affect someone else. I even allowed myself to imagine a future that belonged only to me. Maybe travel someday, maybe even to Europe, just to walk streets where no one knew my family history. The thought felt free, not selfish. When the phone finally rang weeks later, I knew before answering that reality had reached them. I didn't pick up. I didn't need to. Chapter 2 of my life wasn't about explaining myself anymore. It was about standing still and letting the truth land where it needed to. And for the first time, I didn't flinch. It began on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that usually slips by without leaving a mark. I was in Madison, walking down a quiet office hallway with beige walls and low lights, thinking about nothing more serious than the meeting ahead. My coffee was still warm in my hand. My mind was calm. Then my phone vibrated. I glanced down without thinking. Father calling. My steps slowed, then stopped completely. My heart didn't race the way it used to. Instead, it gave one heavy thud, like it had recognized something familiar and unpleasant. I stood there while people passed me, my thumb hovering over the screen. I could almost hear his voice already, sharp with urgency, wrapped in accusation. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it went silent. Before I could slip the phone back into my pocket, it buzzed again. Mother calling. I stared at her name longer this time. There was a pressure behind my eyes, not tears exactly, but memory. Old scenes played in flashes. Her sighs, her disappointment, her talent for turning worry into blame. I imagined her voice trembling, imagined the story she was already telling herself about my cruelty. I let it ring. Then, with a steady hand that surprised me, I declined the call. My hands were calm. That was the strangest part. No shaking. No rush of panic. Just quiet control, like I had already survived the worst part and didn't need to relive it. I went into the meeting and took my seat. I nodded at the right moments, took notes, and spoke when needed. From the outside, I must have looked completely normal. Inside, something important was happening. I wasn't fighting the urge to explain myself. I wasn't rehearsing apologies in my head. I was simply present. After the meeting ended, I checked my phone out of habit. There were voicemails. Several. I didn't listen to them. I didn't need to. I already knew the tone, the pattern, the emotional trap hidden inside every word. The texts came next, one after another, stacking up like demands. Call us. It's urgent. We need help. Now. Your mother is under a lot of stress. Don't be heartless. We raised you. That last message made me laugh out loud in the empty stairwell. The sound was harsh, not joyful. Because yes, they raised me. They raised me to believe love had to be earned. They raised me to believe that saying no was selfish. They raised me to believe my worth depended on how much I gave away. And standing there with my phone in my hand, I realized I had finally outgrown that lesson. That evening, rain fell hard and steady as I drove home to Harrisburg. The streetlights blurred into soft gold streaks across my windshield. The radio played quietly, some song about forgiveness that I turned off halfway through. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, listening to the rain drum against the roof. My house stood there, patient and solid, exactly where I had left it. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and stood in the entryway. The house made its usual sounds, wood settling, pipes ticking softly. It felt alive, like it recognized me. I turned on a lamp instead of the overhead light, letting the room glow gently. Then I opened my laptop. I went to the folder I rarely looked at anymore. the one labeled with a simple name that hid so much truth. Inside were records, confirmations, and payment receipts. Month after month, year after year. I scrolled slowly, my chest tightening as the numbers added themselves up in my head. When I finally totaled it, I stared at the final amount. Over $52,000. More than many people make in a year. More than enough to change a life. And still they had looked at me and asked for my house. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The anger came then, but it wasn't explosive. It was clear, sharp, and focused. Not just anger at them, but anger at how easily my effort had been erased. How invisible my sacrifices had been. A few days later, my sister tried. She called from Portland, her number lighting up my phone in the late afternoon. I almost ignored it, but something told me this conversation needed to happen. I answered. Her voice was soft, careful. "You can't do this," she said. "They're really struggling." "I'm not doing anything," I replied evenly. "I just stopped paying their bills." There was a pause. A long one. "You were paying their bills?" she asked, disbelief slipping through her voice. "Yes," I said. I almost smiled. Her tone shifted immediately. "Well, you can't just stop. You know how they are." I looked out my window at the quiet street, at the tree across the way losing its leaves. I thought about telling her how I was. How I had learned to stand still in discomfort. How I had learned that love doesn't grow where fear lives. Instead, I said one simple thing. "You're their daughter too." Silence again. The kind that says more than words ever could. We ended the call shortly after. When I set my phone down, it felt heavier than usual, like a weight I was finally willing to put away. I turned it off and left it on the kitchen counter. The house felt quieter without it, like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding had finally been released. That night I made dinner slowly. I ate at my table, alone but not lonely. I washed the dishes and dried them carefully, enjoying the simple rhythm of it. Later I sat on my couch with a blanket and thought about the future. Not in grand plans, but in gentle possibilities. Travel maybe someday. A long trip, maybe even to Europe, just to walk and see and exist without anyone needing anything from me. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't bracing myself for the next call. I had chosen peace, and it felt unfamiliar but right. The phone would ring again. I knew that. But I also knew something else now. I didn't have to answer. They didn't stop trying after I went quiet. If anything, they tried harder. Calls came from numbers I didn't recognize, voices I hadn't heard in years. Messages traveled through the family like whispers in a long hallway. My Aunt Doreen sent me a long email about forgiveness, the kind filled with soft words that felt sharp when I read them closely. My cousin Ethan left a voicemail telling me I was breaking the family, and that I would regret it someday. I listened once, then deleted it. I wanted to ask where this family was when my parents demanded my house like it was spare change. I wanted to ask why no one broke a sweat over my future. But I didn't ask. I didn't answer. I didn't defend myself. I learned something important during that time. Silence can be stronger than explanation. Every argument invites a counterargument. Every reason invites another demand. I was done playing that game. So instead of arguing, I lived. I woke up each morning in my own bed. I made coffee the way I liked it. I went to work, came home, and filled my evenings with things that made me feel steady. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I let the noise pass without letting it inside me. I started with small changes. One weekend, I repainted my living room a soft cream color, something warm and calm. I took my time rolling paint slowly, watching the old color disappear. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't overthink. I fixed the porch step that had been loose for months, tightening the bolts myself instead of waiting for someone else to handle it. Each small task made me feel more rooted, more present in my own life. This house wasn't just where I lived. It was where I chose myself. Work took me south occasionally, and on one of those trips I found a small Saturday market in Savannah. It wasn't loud or crowded, just rows of simple stalls and the smell of fresh bread in the air. I bought flowers without talking myself out of it. I spent $18 on a loaf of bread and didn't feel guilty. I walked back to my hotel carrying those small pleasures like proof that I deserved nice things, even if no one else approved. What surprised me most was how I changed on the inside. When I stopped paying my parents' bills, I didn't become bitter. I didn't turn cold. It became clear. The fog I had lived in for years lifted, and I could finally see the shape of my own boundaries. I understood that helping someone at the cost of yourself isn't kindness. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. I met with a lawyer named Tanya, a calm woman with kind eyes and a voice that never rushed me. Her office was quiet, filled with light and clean lines. I told her everything, about the house, the pressure, the money I had been sending for years. She listened without judgment. She explained my options in plain language. She helped me understand how to protect my home, how to make sure no one could corner me again. Walking out of her office, I felt taller somehow, like knowledge had straightened my spine. Around that same time, I started a small savings plan. Not for my parents. Not for my sister's children. For something that felt honest. I partnered with a local program and began a tiny scholarship fund. Nothing big or dramatic. $500 here. $1,000 there. Enough to help someone buy books or pay a fee without strings attached. If a student wanted help, it would come from choice, not pressure. Giving felt different when it wasn't forced. It felt clean. Months passed. The calls slowed. The messages became less frequent, then stopped altogether. One quiet evening, I checked my email and saw a message from my mother. No subject line. Just a few short sentences. We are struggling.